should we be doing drug testing? And yeah, I think it's a great topic to talk about because my answer is always, well, it depends.
It's our favorite answer. And it's our favorite answer not because, we're trained lawyers, because that's like a lawyery response, but it opens the door for inquisition. It opens the door for, well, tell us more about the situation, the circumstances, the scenario, and then we can give you a solution that makes sense for your context. So after it depends, what would you say after that, or what would you be expecting to hear from the client?
Well, it depends is typically followed with, what type of workers are you employing? What is your industry? Are you legally required to do drug testing? Remember I said, well, what are your competitors doing? That's usually a good key. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to follow what all of your competitors are doing, but if you do some recon, you're going to find some common themes. And again, when I ask that, it's because unless you're doing something incredibly amazing and different than your competitors, chances are you probably want to be in the same general ballpark. Because when we talk about drug screening, there's definitely some pros and cons to doing it. And those are the questions that I start asking are, well, first off, do you initially have just an idea of what side you lean on and why? And then we start to have those conversations as to, do we have a hint that they want to or that they don't want to? Because I think we've had some clients who were pretty adamant one way or the other.
Yeah. So we had a client in the alcohol space. They made bitters. They made the thing that goes into drinks. And the owner was very adamant and said, we do not want drug testing. We do not want to limit our employees' ability to, smoke or whatever the case may be. And I said, you may not want to offer, or you may not want to do drug testing, but let me tell you the merits of at least creating a performance aspect of that, right? If whatever you do on your time or your break or at home impedes your ability to perform and especially keep people safe, right? You'd mentioned, what type of worker do you have? Well, a part of this employer was warehouse. And so if you're driving a forklift or doing something where you're operating machinery, you might want to make sure that there's performance standards in place, maybe a vision test, maybe something, right? Right? Do you know what day it is today? Can you walk backwards? I don't know, whatever the case may be, and tie it to performance. Because yes, there are more progressive companies out there who are leaning towards, well, it's legal, so then it should be legal at work. But another thing too is about moderation, right? So you want to make sure that you have policies that protect your business, even if you're looking to protect the rights of your team.
I think this is a really great topic to discuss because, I'm out in California. California legalized marijuana quite some time ago. And there's been...
when was it not?
It's been a while. But as of, checking for our podcast, I saw that there's actually 37 states now who have legalized at least the medicinal use. Mm-hmm. And so this really is, I think a topic to revisit because if companies had these zero tolerance policies before, they're really not going to work anymore. And I think these are the conversations that we need to be having around, well, first, do you still need this policy as a whole? Or can we rewrite it so that we're focusing more on performance? Mm-hmm. So we're focusing more on this idea of don't come to work under the influence of anything, whether it's legal, or whether not. It's even just a prescribed medication or alcohol. So it's let's not necessarily carve it out and have this separate policy. We can still wrap it all under our expectations of what we expect you to do when you are on work time.
I was going to say, you mentioned about prescriptions. Mm-hmm. And whenever you talk about medicine, prescriptions, my favorite three letters, the ADA, right? Americans with Disabilities Act. And so employers have to create certain accommodations for people. And so that can be tough for, a manager who's managing an employee who is taking medicinal marijuana, maybe for depression or for something else. And they may be managing someone and saying, oh, they should be more engaged, they should be more involved. But no, I have this prescription. Yep. So how do accommodations factor into leading people at work?
Yeah. It can sometimes be a little bit tricky because I think, immediately those that don't, really work directly within this space immediately think, oh, well, it's marijuana. Like you can't have it while you're at work, and like immediately just write it off. But when it comes to, now we're faced with this medicinal use. So it is a prescribed prescription from a doctor. So you can't have a blanket policy that says we can't allow, like, how are you going to tell somebody that they can't take a different medication that's been prescribed? You simply can't.
Well, I will give you one instance, and there's some folks in the room in this space. In GovCon, right? If you're in federal contracting, you will have contracts that will say, zero tolerance for drugs. And we've actually had an employer that we worked with. They wanted to hire in Colorado. Everybody knows it's a little tricky, right? They actually had to turn down a candidate that they actually really wanted because the person disclosed, like, "Hey, I'm on medicinal marijuana," and so that was a real blow. That, no pun intended, but they were really upset that they couldn't bring this person on board because there was no way that they were going to pass the drug test, but also there was no way that they were going to stop their medicine. And so it's a really, really tricky place that employers are in right now. But, the law is the law and the federal law is federal law. And so, we are where we are.
Yes. And I just wanted to add to that for clarity in regards to the medicinal use and the ADA. The Adults with Disabilities Act does require employers to engage in what's called the interactive process. So in the simplest terms, if you're not familiar with it, because that's kind of like HR lingo, it just means that individuals that are protected under the Adults with Disabilities Act, there's a requirement on the employer to engage in something that's called the interactive process. It's really just a fancy term for you can't just immediately disregard this employee for their disabling condition. You need to have a conversation. It's a two-way dialogue about what do they need and what can the employer provide that isn't an undue hardship to allow this individual to perform their job with some sort of modification. And, I think when it comes to the medicinal use of marijuana, those are the conversations that we need to be having.
Yeah. And I think the more that we understand and accept, even just from a mental health standpoint, that's a episode in and of itself, because we're now understanding more and more about our minds and how we respond to stress. I was talking to my wife about this thing I found on WebMD. I was like, "Hey, babe, do I have this? Do I have this condition?" Everything's fine.
Never Google it, Joey. That's
I know, it's a rabbit trail.
Nope, that's the number one rule. Never trust Dr. Google.
Yeah. Well, I was like, okay, I can check the box in like 2 of the 7 things, but since that's not all of them, I think I'm good. But my point is, we are embracing more about mental health and the nuances that we have as individuals, whether it be our the at the chemical level or the emotional trauma level or whatever the case may be. And so the more we'll save it for another podcast, but the more we learn about mental health, the more employers are going to need to support people along their journey. All right. So we ran out of drug topics to talk about, but are there any parting thoughts that you want to share with the show?
Well, I think overall, it was really great to cover your article and talk about HR trends. I thought well, wouldn't it be cool to kind of do like Joey and Sommer's like crystal ball for next year? But when I looked at your article, I was like, well, Joey kind of already covered it. But I do think that we are going to definitely see some drastic changes over not only the next year, but the next couple of years. And the Consultants Corner topic, I think was great and relevant for our listeners because we haven't really dove into it, I think, to that level. But I think it was a great show today.
Yeah, I think so too. And I want to thank the audience for being our guinea pigs as we beta test this format, and would love to see you out on the road at some point. But this room is filled with the people that I wanted to invite who believe in Jumpstart, are supporters in some way or another, and have been along in varying degrees of the 11-year journey. I've known this guy for even before the journey. Did I follow you to Baltimore, or you followed me? I did. But I've known Warren since DC Sherm days, and I was working in DC, and then I just said, I'm tired of this traffic, and work somewhere else. But thank you all. This ends this episode of While We Were Working. So if you love it, leave it a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and join us next week.